Hi everybody. It's a great pleasure to be able to share a few words with you on the occasion of your General Assembly of AFE today. I'm terribly disappointed that I can't be there with you in person today. It's probably the last event of this year that I unfortunately cannot attend in person. I hope everybody enjoyed a great Christmas time. It's remarkable that you guys came together at this time of the year, when a year that we look to in our back mirrors has been so challenging, has been taking so much out of everybody's time and energy, and for you guys to be there and hold this General Assembly in the middle of the Christmas period, the New Year's period, is remarkable. AFE is an incredible important part of FIFPro. It's one of our founding members. It is a permanent member of our board. It adds incredible strength to FIFPro, and we're incredibly proud to be able to work with you and what you have created as a union domestically over many decades. What a year it has been. It's not an easy year to look back on. It's been challenging for all of us. I personally took on this role as General Secretary of FIFPro on the 1st of January this year, and I could not have imagined experiencing what I experienced over the last 12 months. And I'm sure the same goes for many, many of you. I can only imagine how uncertain this year was, the leagues being interrupted, pressure from clubs on wages, uncertainty about the match calendar, uncertainty about the health protocols, and of course overall the situation in Spain being incredibly difficult with the coronavirus having a severe impact on your communities. But I think we've all shown incredible resilience through this year, and we're all learning things from this year that hopefully we're able to take forward and build strength, build capacity. When you look back at this year, arguably the player unions around the world have never been more important than in 2020. We've had over the world thousands of players who had their salaries unilaterally cut, thousands of players whose contracts are coming under pressure. We've had many, many players with absolute uncertainty about the health provisions provided to them by their clubs, their leagues, and their federations to continue their seasons and their jobs. But it's also been a period in which the players have shown incredible leadership, whether it's been about helping their communities in the period of this COVID pandemic, whether it's been about being very, very disciplined to get football back on the pitches, whether it's been around the social justice movement that's happening around the world with the protests after the murder of George Floyd, the walk-off after the discriminatory incident a couple of weeks back in the PSG game against Istanbul. The players are stepping up, and the players are leading the face of sport what it really should be. When we're looking back today, it's an interesting point in history. 2 weeks ago today, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the famous Bosman ruling. The Belgian player who reached the freedom for a player to move at the end of the contract without compensation being payable by the club. A freedom that so many of you have probably enjoyed by now, and a freedom that was neglected to players in the past. We need to carry strength and remembrance from the shoulders that we stand on and the legacy that we come from and the battles that AFE and other player unions have led. But we need to look forward with vision. I think it's an incredible period in time in which the players need to show leadership, because there's still so much to do, so much to accomplish to receive justice for all players around the world. As FIFPro, we're representing 65,000 players around the world in 65 countries, many of whom have far worse conditions than players in Spain. Why? Because the unions haven't been able to accomplish what AFE has accomplished. Why? Because the socioeconomic circumstances are worse than in Spain. Why? Because the systems of governance do not allow for real collective bargaining, for real collective agreements to set the rules where they need to be. Equality for female players, where AFE has done a tremendous job negotiating the collective bargaining agreement about a year ago, is incredibly important for FIFPro and all our members around the world. The competition design questions that are coming into our very, very near future, back with the Champions League reform, other competition design questions that could severely impact not only the match calendar for the elite players, but of course also the financial wherewithal of the clubs domestically and therefore the careers of thousands of players in Europe. As I mentioned, racism and discrimination in our game, still a huge topic that we need to tackle. And last but not least, of course, the ever remaining topic of the transfer regulations. The questions, how can a player move? What freedoms do we have? What protections do we have if a club doesn't pay the wages? How can we improve on these conditions? There is still so much to do. And in this period of COVID, it's been very, very clear that this game needs leadership. Our sport has had, over the last 5 to 10 years, enormous problems with its governance, with the credibility of institutions to lead our game. And when I look back over the last few years, it makes me incredibly proud that it's actually the players who stepped into that fold and represented what this game is meant to be. And the same we need to do now collectively. We need to keep pushing ahead for the betterment of the players' conditions, but also for the best that this game should be. And I think in order for us to be able to do that, it's time to leave the politics to others. Too often do we get caught up, in my impression, in the fights between clubs, the leagues, the federations, that don't lead anywhere. We need to keep focused, we need to keep the eye on the ball, we need to keep driving forward and lead this game and lead so that the players have a fair future ahead of them. We as unions, we can be quicker, we can be more progressive, we can lead, but we can only do so if we're driven by the players. And that's why all of you here in that room today are so important. FIFPro is nothing without its member unions, and the member unions are nothing without the players. The players are the union, the players are FIFPro, and that is what ultimately matters and what's giving us legitimacy. I was asked to comment on a few things that apparently came up in the last few weeks about the situation of AFE in FIFPro. We're obviously noticing that there's a lot of debate around this situation, and I just wanted to make a few points. As I mentioned, I took over this job at the beginning of this year, but I've been with FIFPro for many, many years before that. And ever since David came into AFE, we've had a very, very positive and strong cooperation. Like in the past with Ruby, like in the past with Gerardo, David has been instrumental to what FIFPro has been doing. And AFE has, like I mentioned, so many issues around which you're driving and which makes AFE one of the strongest members FIFPro has around the world. David is an important member of our board, now for a few years' time. And we're going into a year of elections next year in which both our global board, our European board will be re-elected. And we only look forward for AFE to take an even greater leadership role within FIFPro. We're in the process of going through a reform process to reflect even more diversity in our organization, to extend our board to make more room for more women, for more people of different ethnicities, different geographic backgrounds to come forward. And in all of this time of change and time of reformation, we need the big unions like AFE to step up and lead. And we have no doubts that you will. When the European board was composed the last time, which is 3 years ago now, David was not yet a member of FIFPro. And unfortunately, he today is not sitting on this board. But like I mentioned, next year there are elections, and it would be a tremendous opportunity for FIFPro if AFE came forward and made themselves available to possibly run for a seat on this board as well. And finally, I understand there were some questions around the royalties, the financial contributions FIFPro makes to our member unions. And there's of course a little reality that also on our end, a couple of the processes got delayed. Why? Because the same way you had to postpone your General Assembly, we had to as well. Normally we meet around November with our members, which allows us to approve our financials. This year this will happen in February. That led to some delays in some of the payouts we've made, but also it is clear that we've had in the last couple of years incredibly, unusually successful financial situations. That is not necessarily the reality every year. And of course, in a year of COVID, things do look a little bit different, but we're incredibly proud and we're very excited that actually in this time where everybody around football, everybody around the world needs to cut wages, need to cut staff, need to cut expenses, we were able to financially support our member unions at the same level that they're used to, which is the solidarity system to which AFE and other ones of the big unions heavily contribute and which thousands of players around the world are benefiting from by even having a union that's available to them. That being said, again, I want to say that it's incredibly onerous to be able to say a few words to you. I'm very, very hopeful that next year when your Congress takes place again, I'll be able to be there with you in person and to visit the Assembly. I know there are important meetings next year with your elections coming up as well. And I just want to leave you with a few words. As I mentioned, FIFPro represents 65,000 players around the world. We have an enormous job to do for them, for the top-end players who play way too much every week and whose bodies are getting the toll of the match calendar, to tens of thousands of players who need basic conditions, basic contracts, basic arbitration, and really justice for their human rights. We can only do so if AFE is strong. AFE can only do so when the players are involved. And seeing you there today is incredibly empowering for us to know that you are behind AFE and therewith you are behind FIFPro. We look forward to keep working for you, working hard and making improvements for all the issues that matter to you, and to keep driving the players' cause forward. And finally, I want to close with your famous slogan, Unidos somos más fuertes. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great meeting.